Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. Tensions rise over Greenland as President Trump says he no longer feels obligated to think purely of peace in pursuing the Arctic island. And the president says the UK's plan to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius is, quote, an act of great stupidity. We have the update. Netflix adjusted its offer for Warner Brothers Discovery. The streaming titan now says it will pay all cash rather than a mix of cash and stock. Britain approves plans for China's largest European embassy in London, despite security concerns, as Prime Minister Keir Starmer prepares for a possible visit to Beijing. 1 year since the start of the second Trump administration, how has the president shaped the economy and the world outside America's borders? We have a recap of the past year.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Tuesday, January 20th. I'm Stephanie Cox. The latest on Greenland. President Trump says he no longer feels obligated to think purely of peace in his push to acquire the Arctic island. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports on that, plus other updates as tensions over the territory continue to simmer.
President Trump made the comments when replying to a joint message from Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre and Finnish President Alexander Stubb. Trump wrote, quote, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant." Trump says he can now focus on what's best for the United States of America. The president later brushed aside interest in the Nobel Peace Prize, saying that he cared more about saving lives. And Trump yesterday accused Denmark of failing to do enough to secure Greenland before boarding Air Force One.
They can't protect it. Denmark, they're wonderful people. And I know the leaders are very good people, but they don't even go there. And, you know, because the boat went there 500 years ago and then left, that doesn't give you title to property.
Trump says NATO has been warning Denmark for decades to safeguard Greenland against the Russian threat.
And it's not only Russia, it's also China. So we'll see what happens. But let's put it this way. It's going to be a very interesting Davos.
Trump has said that U.S. acquisition of the island is critical to U.S. national security. UN Ambassador Mike Waltz discusses why President Trump wants Greenland, speaking on Fox News.
If you look at Denmark's defense expenditures, they have 0 heavy icebreakers. They really have no Navy in the Western Hemisphere to speak of, and they certainly aren't contributing in a meaningful way to the Golden Dome, space, or other types of missile defense we have to have. Meanwhile, look at Russia with over 60 icebreakers, some nuclear. The Chinese are building more. They're pushing up into the natural resources that are up there.
Trump also discussed another island on Truth Social yesterday, writing, "Shockingly, our brilliant NATO ally, the United Kingdom, is currently planning to give away the island of Diego Garcia, the site of a vital U.S. military base, to Mauritius, and to do so for no reason whatsoever." Trump wrote that China and Russia, international powers who only recognize strength, must have noticed the act. The president wrote, quote, "The UK giving away extremely important land is an act of great stupidity, and is another in a very long line of national security reasons why Greenland has to be acquired." Trump also wrote on Truth Social that he had a very good telephone call with Mark Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, concerning Greenland. Trump says he agreed to a meeting of the various parties in Davos, Switzerland, and wrote, quote, "As I expressed to everyone, very plainly, Greenland is imperative for national and world security. There can be no going back. On that, everyone agrees." Denmark increased its military presence in Greenland yesterday, sending additional troops to the Arctic territory. About 100 soldiers are already in Nuuk, with more expected to deploy to western Greenland. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Thank you, Daniel. And Britain today responded to Trump's comment on the Chagos Islands. A government spokesperson said, quote, "The UK will never compromise on our national security." The spokesperson said the base on Diego Garcia was under threat after court rulings that could have prevented the base from operating in the future. Last May, Britain agreed to transfer sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. In return, the UK and the US secured continued use of the joint military base. Under the deal, Mauritius gains control of the islands, while the US and UK can operate the base for the next 99 years. Prime Minister Keir Starmer previously warned of risks without a deal. He said other nations, including China, could establish bases nearby. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent also shares a message with Europe over Greenland. Here he is speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland today.
I tell everyone, sit back, take a deep breath, do not retaliate, do not retaliate. The president will be here tomorrow, and he will get his message across. I believe he is going to have meetings, and again, also have an open mind that, why this rapid response in terms of, this is a no.
Bessent said President Trump has a very strong view on Western Hemisphere security, and he believes the U.S. should not outsource national security. He said Trump believes Greenland is essential for the proposed Golden Dome anti-missile shield. The Treasury Secretary brushed off concerns that U.S.-EU relations would sour. He said the relationship has never been closer and that European nations are still U.S. allies. EU leaders are set to discuss possible retaliation against the U.S. at an emergency summit in Brussels on Thursday. We'll be keeping you updated on that. But one option is a package of tariffs on about $110 billion of U.S. imports. The EU Foreign Affairs chief also voiced support today for Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland.
Greenland belongs to its people. No threat or tariffs will change that. Sovereignty is not for trade. The European Union stands without doubt with Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark in defense of their territorial integrity and sovereignty.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said today that the bloc's executive arm is working on a package to support Arctic security. She warned that tariffs proposed by President Trump over Greenland are a mistake. Von der Leyen said Arctic security can only be achieved together. In a speech in Davos, she said the United States agreed to a trade deal last July, and in politics, as in business, a deal is a deal. Meanwhile, NATO's commander in Europe said today that the Greenland issue was now a political issue. He said NATO is focused on what it always focuses on, defending and deterring aggression against any part of alliance territory. President Trump is threatening to impose 200% tariffs on French wines and champagne. That's if French President Emmanuel Macron decides not to join the U.S.-led Board of Peace on Gaza. Here's what Trump had to say.
Did you give any response to President Macron saying he will not join the Board of Peace?
Oh, did he say that? Well,
Yeah.
Nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
France will hold an election to replace Macron next year. The French Constitution limits presidents to 2 consecutive terms. Trump's Board of Peace is part of Phase 2 of a U.S.-backed ceasefire between Israel and Hamas terrorists. The board will oversee the Palestinian Committee, which is led by a former official for the Palestinian Authority. Earlier today, Macron commented on recent developments while attending the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. He said international leaders should not bow down to, quote, intimidation tactics. This after President Trump threatened to increase tariffs on the entire European Union if the bloc prevents an American purchase of Greenland. Meanwhile, President Trump this morning posted what he described as private messages from Macron. The messages questioned Trump's push on Greenland. Macron said he did not understand what Trump was doing on Greenland. In the screenshots posted on Truth Social, Macron also made a proposal. He offered to host a G7 meeting scheduled for January 22nd. Macron suggested inviting additional participants. He mentioned Ukrainians, Danes, Syrians, and Russians. He said they could take part in the sidelines of the meeting. The French president said he was totally in line with Trump on Syria. He said the two leaders could do great things on Iran. Macron also invited President Trump to dinner in Paris. And as the European Union prepares for a meeting to discuss how to respond to Trump's tariff threats, NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar breaks down the measure known as the anti-coercion tool.
It's about international trade and financial pressure.
Trade tensions between the U.S. and Europe seem to be rising. On Saturday, President Trump warned he would increase tariffs on imports from Europe if Denmark doesn't sell Greenland to the U.S. The European Union might now test its anti-coercion instrument, or ACI. Policy analyst Juraj Majchin says the tool allows the bloc to respond to U.S. trade restrictions with tariffs, restrictions on investments, or by preventing U.S. businesses from operating in the European Union. The last option is the most crucial one. Majchin says American tech giants could be among those targeted due to the financial impact and the closeness of several tech executives to the Trump administration.
I think that would send a really strong message of union to President Trump that, look, we can inflict pain not only on the country, but also on the people who are very loyal to you. So I think U.S. tech giants will be the first that come to mind.
He added that the EU has so far resisted using such measures to retaliate on U.S. tariffs due to fears of higher inflation and weakening its own economic growth. But according to Majchin, the situation is changing.
But now the case of Greenland is different because it's really a sovereignty of a member state in question.
European Union members are set to meet on Thursday to discuss how to respond to Trump's tariff warning. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
And now a preview of what's coming up tonight on NTD Evening News with Tiffany Meyer.
Tonight on NTD Evening News, President Trump will be flying to Switzerland to address the World Economic Forum. This year's annual meeting features the largest U.S. delegation ever. Our White House correspondent Mario Tsu is covering the event on the ground in Switzerland. Tune in for that and more tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern, only on NTD.
Coming up, President Trump today hit the one-year mark in his second term. Strategists from both parties shared their perspectives. That and more ahead. Welcome back. It's 1 year today since President Trump began his second term. From national security to the economy, how's the commander-in-chief doing? Joining us to debate is Republican strategist Angie Wong and Democratic strategist Robin Biro. Good to have you both with us today, Angie, Robin. First up, we'll start with you, Angie. How would you grade the president so far, and what's the most consequential action of this term that impacts that grade?
Well, I think the president's, his report card is looking pretty good. I mean, he's done a lot. I mean, we've been covering him for the past 12 months, and I don't think I've had 20 minutes of sleep because every 20 minutes we've had breaking news. So I think closing the borders was his number one priority. He took care of that really quickly with Tom Homan and Kristi Noem. He's still working on getting a lot of the illegal criminals out of our country, and that's not been pretty, but the job is getting done. So I'm giving him an A on that. He's also restoring justice with the DOJ. He's now going after a lot of the fraud that we're finding state to state. I think that is one of the most incredible things that I've seen, because up until now, we've kind of let it go, even though we all have known that there was a lot of cleanup there. And then, of course, we have the economy, we have DOGE, we have energy, we have tariffs. So, and as a gift to all Americans today on his 1 year anniversary of being back on his second term, he is putting a cap on credit card interest at 10%. So I think he's been doing a great job on both the domestic and international fronts.
It's almost too hard to choose one single focus here. There's been a lot happening in this first year. Robin, your take.
Like my esteemed colleague here, I too have had very little sleep this year. It's been a very consequential year. On that, we can both agree. Overall, I would give him a C, which I think is fair, speaking as a Democrat. But there's things that stand out for me. Yes, I agree with Angie. The border closures, we did have a problem. I admit that on the Biden administration with open borders. So I would give him a B+ on that. With there's a couple things. The military, I think he's actually done really well with the military. I would give him an A on that. I really liked the $1,776 bonus that he gave our military recently. Speaking as a veteran myself, I really like that. I think, though, what nobody's talking about in the media that is probably the most consequential is that you've seen a drastically different Donald Trump this term than his first in terms of his health. You're not seeing him loading up on burgers and KFC. You've seen him eating more healthy. You've seen him going to the doctor and having doctor's appointments. Speaking as a male, that has big ramifications because there's so many men who are stubborn about going to the doctor and taking care of their personal health. He's set a good example with that, and on that I want to applaud him. Where I think he's struggling is specifically with the economy. CPI, the Consumer Price Index, did only rise by 2.7%, but tariffs have hurt people in their wallets. That's leading to some expenses at home that are wonky. Home foreclosures right now are up by 19% from where they were a year ago. That's alarming to me. Car repossessions are up by 43%, which I'm surprised that nobody's talking about that. Credit card charge-offs are up by 52%, excuse me. So there's if you read the tea leaves, there's starting to be some things alarming about the economy. I think tariffs are hurting people where are hurting in their wallets. So we'll give them a D plus on that.
Okay, a nice detailed report there. Let's dig into some of the issues that you both raised. We'll start with national security, the border, as well as law enforcement more broadly within the country. Of course, crime was a big focus. Angie, your take on how he's doing with that so far? It's been a big focus quite recently. Yeah.
It has been. It's been the big news story, certainly of 2025 now. Still here with us in Minneapolis and other cities as well. So every time we see law enforcement go into a city to do their job, whether it's federal ICE agents or local PD, you see a lot of people impeding them. And, we've been calling them protesters up until now, but really what they are agitators, because now they're starting to cross into churches and other places of worship. And I think that is where the line doesn't exist for them. And I think that you have to allow for both local PD and federal agents to do their job. I don't think there's any, governor or local mayor who can really impede that. If they try and they bring it to the courts, they're going to fail. So, President arresting people, especially illegals, it was never going to be a pretty job. It was never going to look great. And certainly the media is putting a focus on it. What I don't like are Democrats now changing the message and making it look like it's a protest or making it look like they're being wronged for, essentially law enforcement doing their work. And I think that has to be a message that's changed because we have to help our law enforcement, not impede them.
Does that message change for your part, Robin?
It does to a degree. Now, if you look at the Homeland Security website right now, it will say that 47.3% of all apprehensions right now are of violent criminals. I applaud that. I would say that they're skipping due process. That's something that, speaking as a former Obama campaign staffer, the Obama administration was able to deport. I mean, you recall, he was labeled by people within my party as the deporter in chief. He got it done with due process. So, the strongman tactic, I'm not a big fan of, but he's getting it done fast. That should be applauded. Apprehensions are way up. Illegal border crossings are way down. I'm just telling you, I'm speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. My kids are going to school with students, though, who are legal immigrants who are afraid to go to school right now because they're of Hispanic descent and they're worried they're going to get picked up and things like that. I don't like that at all. But he's making some progress, and we had to do something because the Biden administration really did have open border.
Okay, let's look at more broadly the global economy. There's been so much happening with tariffs. You've both brought up the cost of living and so the impacts internally, but also with the way the U.S. stands on the global stage, seeking to kind of re-engineer the global economy in some ways. And the impact so far, Angie, your part.
Well, we're about to get a decision from the Supreme Court about his tariffs right now. So I think we're all kind of holding our breath to see what happens there, because what he's done with the Trump tariffs is rattle the nerves around the world. Every single world leader sat up either wanted to do a deal with the Trump administration or reject it, like India has. So it's been a complete shakeup of geopolitics. And I've been defending the Trump administration around the world on multiple international channels because they just don't understand the man. Ultimately, we want what's best for America. We should, right? We are Americans, and we've been shooken up way too long by previous presidents that won't do a deal that is fair for Americans. So I think that's what President Trump wants to get to. Now, again, all that could be reversed with the new SCOTUS decision that we were probably expecting. I thought it was coming down today, but it might be a couple of days. We'll see. But ultimately, our economy hasn't really adjusted to the one big beautiful bill yet, right? That just kicked off in January. It still needs a lot of time to trickle down, maybe even a quarter or two in order for you and I to see the effects. But will that be enough time to feel the savings that we're going to get from that before the midterms? I'm not sure. I think that's what we're all waiting on.
Yeah, and Robin, you mentioned the CPI. Of course, President Trump had always forecast that these tariffs are going to have the most benefit felt in the long run, perhaps some initial pain. But what do you see of the potential for that impact in the long run if, say, they're upheld amid the cost of living right now?
Yeah, you bet. So I want to be fair on this. Big bills like this, take, for example, the Affordable Care Act. That was enormously unpopular when it first came out. It had about a 64% disapproval rating when Obamacare first became a thing, the law of the land. But as these big bills age and people get used to them and see that they do benefit, they become more popular. Right now, the Affordable Care Act enjoys about a 59% approval rating. That's a drastic difference from a 64% disapproval rating. So I think the same thing's going to happen with the big, beautiful bill, as we're calling it. It's a little unpopular right now, but we've got, as Andrew said, we've got to live with the growing pains and see how it adjusts. It will probably become more popular as it ages. Maybe not in this term, but headed to the next, which would benefit Republicans actually for the 2028 election.
Great. And we will, good to have both of your insights, and we will get more into that aspect of the election coming up. But just checking in now in terms of energy dominance, of course, that's key to Trump's overall agenda. For both of you, a brief word on where you think Trump stands on that so far. Angie.
Yeah, briefly, I mean, energy is going to be the key ingredient going into the next several decades, right? We are currently in a arms race over energy with China, with Russia, and other countries. We need that, and that's one of the reasons why we need this Greenland deal. I know it's highly unpopular. I know Mike Johnson, our speaker, just went over to 10 Downing Street in the UK Parliament to try to smooth things over because I think he gets the messaging on this, whereas Trump is going to come in as the bad cop trying to take over Greenland. That is going to be key for us. We need to secure our energy resources. Right now, we're behind. And let's just be frank on that. We don't want to be behind China, and we certainly don't want to be behind Russia.
Okay, and Robin, your response?
The most consequential thing will be, of course, what's happening in Venezuela right now with the United States occupying Venezuela, which has the largest oil reserves right now in the world. That's going to be enormously consequential. I would also say, just being frank, there's really no such thing as clean, beautiful coal. But what we do need to be focusing on is the threat from China right now, because they are dominating when it comes to batteries, specifically for electric vehicles. We cannot compete as Americans right now with what BYD is producing with their electric vehicle batteries. The range far surpasses anything that we can do here in the United States. We have got to catch up or we will be left in the dust.
Wow. Okay. I want to look now at a very important topic, faith. The president has done a lot on this front, including carrying out strikes against terrorists that kill Christians. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also said he'll work to ensure that the Senate passes bills to end forced organ harvesting in China, which is a black market industry that's targeted adherents of the persecuted spiritual group Falun Gong. How has Trump done in advocating for religious liberty, protecting that freedom? Angie.
Yeah, I've seen an uptick in churchgoers, especially with young men in the last year or two. And I think a lot of that has to do with the Trump effect. He's made going to church incredible again, great again. And I think, we're starting to see a lot more kind of faith-based, everything from sports to television shows to anything you touch in America, because it's now okay to be faith-based and be outward about it. I think in the previous years, there were a little bit of hesitancy to show that. And I think Trump is, being a man of faith, has really allowed people to really embrace that and make it great again. So I just thank him for that. I just watched the Miami, Indiana team yesterday, the college football, and both players, they were praying to God. I mean, they were God-loving champions. So I think, all these things are great to see, especially for young people who kind of got lost in that avenue for a long, long time. It's really nice to see that coming back to America.
Robin.
The most consequential thing in terms of faith was the assassination of Charlie Kirk, because now there are chapters of Turning Point USA pretty much in every college, every high school across the country. I know at least in the South, here in the Bible Belt, they're in every single high school here in the South now. I am an elder of my church. My kids are both junior deacons. I've definitely seen an uptick of church attendance. But the assassination of Charlie Kirk had a profound impact on the nation's psyche in terms of believers. And also I want to talk about, we've seen some uptick of anti-Semitism, but at least it's being brought out. We know who the anti-Semites are. We're condemning it across party aisles. That is something that I'm grateful to see. I'm grateful to see more politicians condemning that across party aisles. There's no place for that. This is America. We have freedom of religion and freedom from religion here.
And just as we approach the end of this debate and discussion, as strategists, from your perspective, what's one key thought that you'd like to leave the audience with in terms of the upcoming midterm elections?
Well, I would like to say that President Trump has done so much in the last 12 months, and he's going to keep going. We want to make sure that he has a full 4-year presidency. So we need to make sure that we keep both houses and the Senate as well. And also the governor's seat. We need the whole machine to work in order for the America First agenda to really go all the way, because he's only at the 1-year mark. Could you imagine if we give him a full 3 more years? This is going to be incredible. So we need to vote with our conscience and get Republicans in office come November.
Robin.
We need Democrats to actually step up to the plate. Right now, they are content to sit on their hands. The general thought is to let Republicans run riot, and maybe Americans will get sick of it, and that Democrats will take charge. That's not going to work. We're going to need Democratic action on things that matter and make a difference in the lives of Americans. Also, I want to say that the worst thing that could possibly happen would be another impeachment of Donald Trump. They're wildly unpopular and ineffective. I would not want to see that. Let's just give people some relief where it counts in their wallets.
Great to hear both of your thoughts today. So many insights. Angie Wong, Robin Byro, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And coming up, Netflix adjusted its offer for Warner Brothers Discovery. The streaming titan now says it will pay all cash rather than a mix of cash and stock. Plus, Representative Julia Letlow is challenging fellow Louisiana Republican Bill Cassidy for his Senate seat. We've got that story and much more up ahead. And our thoughts are with the victims of those attacks. The Supreme Court's majority today seems likely to side with gun owners. They're challenging the state of Hawaii's ban on openly carrying a gun on private property open to the public without specific permission. Chief Justice John Roberts posed this hypothetical to the attorney for Hawaii.
Could Hawaii enact a statute that says that if you are wearing the attire expressing approval of a particular political candidate, you can't come in unless you get express consent from the owner of the restaurant?
Again, that's a viewpoint discrimination and prohibited.
It's a violation of the First Amendment. We have a violation of the First Amendment and a violation of the right that the court held is protected by the Second Amendment in Bruin, which is the right of law-abiding citizens to carry a firearm for purposes outside of the home for purposes of self-defense.
The state of Hawaii argued that the law doesn't violate the Constitution because it's consistent with the state's historical firearms rules. Gun owners argued the law infringes on their Second Amendment right because it only relies on local practices rather than applying a national standard. At the end of the day, it was unclear how the court would rule, but considering that several of the arguments and questions centered around the court's reasoning in a similar gun law case, the majority appears to be leaning toward not allowing the Hawaii law. We'll be keeping you updated on that. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell is expected to attend Supreme Court arguments tomorrow. The case examines whether President Trump has the authority to remove Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook. The High Court previously allowed Cook to remain in office while it reviews the dispute. Trump announced plans to remove her last year, citing allegations of mortgage fraud that Cook has denied. The case comes as the president has publicly criticized the Federal Reserve over interest rate policy. Powell has said recent legal actions involving the Fed stem from disagreements over policy decisions. Under federal law, Fed governors may only be removed for cause. Cook's term is scheduled to run through 2038. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said today he believes it would be a mistake for Powell to attend the Supreme Court arguments. Bessent described it as Powell trying to put his thumb on the scale. The Treasury Secretary says President Trump may decide on the next Fed chairman as early as next week. Bessent says they're down to 4 candidates. He says Trump has personally met with all of them. The leading 4 candidates for the role are Trump economic advisor Kevin Hassett, Fed Governor Christopher Waller, former Fed Governor Kevin Warsh, and BlackRock's chief bond investment manager Rick Ryder. Louisiana Congresswoman Julia Letlow is challenging fellow Republican Bill Cassidy for his Senate seat. President Trump has endorsed her candidacy. Letlow was elected to Congress in early 2021 after her husband Luke Letlow died. She has won re-election twice since then. Her challenge comes after Senator Cassidy voted to convict Trump after the president was impeached at the end of his first term. Trump was not convicted after 57 senators voted to convict, short of the 67 votes required. Letlow joins a crowded Senate primary field that includes Louisiana Treasurer John Fleming and State Senator Blake Magaz. The primary is scheduled for April 18th. The general election is slated for November 3rd. With Minnesota in the headlines, the Trump administration is touting the success of ongoing immigration enforcement operations. We have the latest developments as arrest numbers climb and state and federal officials remain at odds.
Homeland Security Secretary Noem says more than 10,000 criminal illegal immigrants have been arrested during immigration operations in Minneapolis. She said Monday 3,000 of those arrests occurred in the last 6 weeks. Many of the arrests came under Operation Metro Surge, which began in early December. DHS has released new information about criminals taken into custody during the operation. They include murderers, rapists, gang members, and perpetrators of fraud. At the same time, the Trump administration is appealing a federal court order limiting how officers can interact with protesters. A judge earlier restricted immigration officers from using pepper spray, non-lethal munitions, or crowd dispersal tools against peaceful protesters. The ruling says that trailing federal agents from a safe distance alone does not constitute reasonable suspicion to warrant a traffic stop. Shortly after this ruling, DHS said it was taking constitutional measures to uphold the rule of law and protect officers and the public from dangerous rioters. Minnesota's Attorney General says the order was an important win for Minnesotans to exercise their right to protest. Federal officials are also renewing criticism of Minnesota leaders for refusing to cooperate with ICE detainers. The DHS has called on Governor Tim Walz and Mayor Jacob Frey to honor arrest detainers for more than 1,300 criminal illegal immigrants in custody across the state. The DHS says hundreds of offenders have been released rather than transferred to federal custody. The immigration operation is unfolding alongside major federal fraud investigations in the state. Secretary Noem says investigators have uncovered at least $19 billion in alleged fraud. In a post on X, she called it just the tip of the iceberg, saying Homeland Security investigators are on the ground in Minnesota.
Netflix says it's now prepared to pay all cash for part of Warner Brothers Discovery. That's offering $27.75 per share after a previous offer that included stock and a lower share price. Netflix only wants the part of the company that includes HBO and Warner Brothers. Other Warner Brothers Discovery channels will be in a separate company called Discovery Global. Paramount is trying to buy the whole company for $30 a share. Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery hope the new offer will fend off that hostile takeover bid. Next, to weather. Intense lake effect snow bands have hit the Midwest and Great Lakes region, creating dangerous travel conditions. So dangerous that dozens of cars were involved in an accident, shutting down a stretch of road for hours. The winter weather is expected to affect the majority of the country before the week is out.
More than 100 cars and several jackknifed semi-trucks sprawled all over the road for hours Monday after they were involved in a pileup on a Michigan interstate. The local sheriff says it began just before 10:30 a.m. on Interstate 196 in Zeeland Township near Grand Rapids.
Holy.
This video from a driver who was involved in the pileup shows the aftermath, with cars smashed up against semi-trucks.
Goes back for miles.
He says there were whiteout conditions from a snowstorm ahead of the crash.
We believe what happened is that a vehicle struck a semi-truck, a tractor trailer. That then set off a chain reaction. I can tell you that a couple dozen tractor trailers were involved in this incident, included in the 100 vehicles that were involved.
The accident prompted the closure of the interstate in both directions between two exits, while authorities worked to clear the wreckage. The Ottawa County Sheriff's Office says there were no fatalities and 10 people suffered minor injuries.
Yeah, about 100 cars.
All right. While dangerous sub-zero wind chills are gripping the Midwest and Great Lakes, frigid cold temperatures 20 to 30 degrees below average are expected to affect many parts of the U.S. soon.
And Britain's government today approved China building its largest embassy in Europe in London. The UK hopes to improve ties with Beijing. This comes despite British and U.S. politicians' warnings that it could be used as a base for spying.
Despite everything China has done on our soil, China has been rewarded with exactly what they want, a super embassy that will be a base for espionage, not just in the UK, but likely across Europe as well. The government has capitulated to Chinese demands. The Prime Minister himself said to President Xi at the G20 in November 2024, and I quote, "You raised the Chinese embassy building in London when we spoke on the telephone. We have since taken action by calling in that application." In other words, the Prime Minister did precisely what President Xi told him to do, and then he faithfully reported back afterwards. This decision has serious implications. Last week, The Telegraph published plans showing 208 secret rooms and a hidden chamber just 1 metre from critical data cables. Our economy depends on those cables, so what assurance can the Minister give that those cables will be secure from Chinese interference?
The site is the 2-century-old Royal Mint Court near the Tower of London. China's plans have stalled for 3 years over opposition from local residents, lawmakers, and Hong Kong pro-democracy campaigners in Britain. Chinese Communist leader Xi Jinping asked UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer last year to intervene. The decision was announced before an expected visit to China by Starmer this month, the first by a British leader since 2018. Some British and Chinese officials said the trip was dependent on the embassy being approved. The government said intelligence agencies devised a range of protective security measures. UK residents reacted to Britain's government approving China building its largest embassy in Europe in London.
We are in a dangerous geopolitical moment. China is explicit about their desire for what they call the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation. That ideology is not about fair competition on the world stage. It's about subjugating the United States and reshaping the international order in the image of the Chinese Communist Party. When Keir Starmer goes to Beijing with the title deeds to the mega embassy in his pocket, I hope he will take with him copies of the Joint Committee on Human Rights report on slave labour and our supply chains, and read those sections that deal with the use of Uyghur slave labour. hope he takes with him a copy of our report on transnational repression.
I am one of the Hong Kongers who has moved to the UK for political reasons. I have had a bounty of 1 million Hong Kong dollar imposed on me by the Chinese Communist Party. We know China. We know Chinese Communist Party and their intentions. Already, we have seen the United Kingdom fail to hold China to its promise over Hong Kong. Our people were abandoned to the mercy of the CCP.
I'm also from Hong Kong and also have a bounty placed on me. I'm angry and disappointed at Labour's government's decision. We have held several large protests outside the Roman court, which have shown beyond doubt that the area is not suitable for an embassy. Major roads have been closed every time we have gathered, causing traffic chaos. We are also told that access to historic ruins on the site will be guarded by Chinese police. People like me will never be able to visit these sites of UK's heritage.
I do not have words to express the grief of my people at being abandoned by those we had come to rely upon. While Uyghurs like me are enslaved, shut up in camps, our women sterilized, our children forcibly separated and subjected to state-run indoctrination, and our voices silenced by threats against us and our families. The UK government is inviting the criminals responsible to create a huge outpost for their criminal behaviour here in London.
We residents have fought this application since we learned that our homes have been sold to China without warning. This has been a long David and Goliath fight. There is now only one way of stopping this: a judicial review. So I am today announcing that our judicial review to challenge the UK government's embassy decision begins today.
House Speaker Mike Johnson making history this morning as the first in his role to address the UK Parliament. The address meant to celebrate 250 years of U.S. independence. NTD's Melina Weisskopf sent us this report.
As proud Americans, it is as though we have returned to the spiritual birthplace of our own nation. And the history here, the weight of it is palpable, as you know.
House Speaker Mike Johnson reflecting on the youth of America as he celebrates the nation's 250th year of American independence from Britain.
We have returned at a pivotal moment, obviously, in the great histories of our countries, to mark this anniversary that we have in our nation and to celebrate what we've achieved together in the past, and importantly, to face and overcome together the challenges of our present day.
The Speaker is the first to address the UK Parliament in London, saying that he feels a responsibility to calm the waters as tensions rise. President Trump now threatening tariffs on the UK and 7 other NATO countries to force a deal for the U.S. to buy Greenland.
I told the President that I felt that my mission here today was to encourage our friends and help to calm the waters, so to speak, and I hope to do so. As the Prime Minister said yesterday, let us look to agreement, continue our dialogue, and find a resolution, just as we always have in the past.
Ahead of Johnson's address, President Trump criticized UK leadership over plans to give the island of Diego Garcia, the site of a vital U.S. military base, to Mauritius, calling it an act of great stupidity. He said it is another in a very long line of national security reasons why Greenland has to be acquired. The House Speaker also used the historic moment to highlight the importance of the bond between the two nations and its weight to deter foreign aggressors.
We see China, Russia, and Iran grow more aggressive and emboldened as they intensify their efforts to exert economic, political, and military influence around the world. We see a callous disregard for basic human rights. Our long-term prosperity and security are currently being undermined by, let's call it a crisis of self-doubt.
The speaker emphasized that the free world depends on the strength of the two nations. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
I'm Stephania Cox, and this is World Watch. The United Arab Emirates is joining President Trump's newly proposed Board of Peace. The UAE Foreign Ministry made the announcement as Trump aims to resolve conflicts in the Middle East. Other countries have expressed interest but have been less clear. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said her country was, quote, ready to do our part. Meanwhile, Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney said Ottawa had agreed to the plan in principle, pending further details. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will travel to the World Economic Forum, but only if the United States is ready to agree to security guarantees. Zelensky added that Ukraine and Europe should create a joint defense force of up to 3 million people to deter a future Russian invasion. Zelensky had been expected to attend the gathering in Davos, but said he had stayed in Kyiv following a major Russian airstrike overnight that involved more than 300 drones and missiles. Kyiv's mayor said the attack knocked out heating to more than 5,000 apartment buildings in the capital. And Spanish emergency workers are searching for more passengers after a deadly train collision killed at least 41 people on Sunday. Today, the nation began 3 days of mourning for the victims. A train carrying 289 passengers collided with another train that was on its way from the Spanish capital Madrid to Malaga. The front of the second train carrying 184 people took the brunt of the impact. Spain's transport minister told local media that a broken section of track could have been a factor in the accident. He added that it could take weeks to reach any definitive conclusions. And Australia closed dozens of beaches after a surfer was bitten by a shark. It was the fourth shark attack in 3 days. Here's an update.
Australia closed dozens of East Coast beaches on Tuesday after 4 shark attacks in 2 days. Heavy rains left waters murky and more likely to attract the predators. The move came after a man got bitten while surfing in Port Macquarie earlier that day. Health authorities said he's stable in hospital. It adds to 3 previous incidents in Sydney, including a young boy who was attacked on Sunday and remains, according to authorities, in a critical condition.
He's in for the fight of his life now, and the actions of emergency services yesterday gave him that chance. It was a horrendous scene at the time when police attended. We believe it was something like a bull shark that attacked the lower limbs of that boy yesterday.
Cartilaginous fish biologist Victoria Camilleri-Ash said a combination of factors explains the rise in shark attacks.
The heavy rains must have stirred up the waters within the river system, including the runoff of quite a few nutrients from agricultural crops and wastewaters coming down the river system and passing through Sydney Harbour down towards the ocean. So that's one factor. And unfortunately, this pairs up also with making the water murkier. So both of those combines already will bring bait fish closer to these nutrients and larger fish, including larger predators, such as sharks.
She added that bull sharks, which authorities presume are behind the attacks, are also migrating to shallower waters for the summer.
The danger is when there is activity in the water, sharks probably can't tell until they're really close what it is, and until even sometimes they have a bite at it. They don't prey upon humans by choice.
The closures come in the middle of the Southern Hemisphere summer, when beaches across Australia are normally packed with locals and tourists. Official data shows Australia sees around 20 shark attacks per year, with fewer than 3 of those being fatalities.
That's all we have time for this hour, but if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We always love to hear from you. Stay with us. We'll be broadcasting the White House press briefing right after this break.